The UH-1 Iroquois was the first turbine-powered helicopter produced by the United States. In 1952, United States didn't have any proper helicopters to perform usual tasks such as medevac, troop transport, cargo, etc. Most of them were either underpowered or were too big and complex to fix. So, in 1955, US Army wanted a workhorse that had a low profile and was easy to maintain. Again, like always, 20 companies participated, one was chosen by the name of Bell, and 3 copies of the Bell 204 design was created by the name of XH-40. The prototype was barely even flown, the US Army already ordered 6 helicopters to be made. After their successful testing, the US Army ordered another 100 helicopters, this time designated HU-1A, officially named Iroquois. Even though it was a mouthful name, people got used to the Huey nickname pretty quick. Later than in 1962 in the Tri-Service designation, the name was changed from HU-1 to UH-1. In 1961, the US Army realized that the engine on the HU-1A was underperforming. So after an engine swap and some minor changes, you have the UH-1B. And this is where we see our first Huey in Warthunder. During its service, several aerodynamic deficiencies were identified, and the vehicle was still having problems. The UH-1C was made specifically to fix these issues by putting on the new engine. And of course, the engine was not the only upgrade that had to be applied to the UH-1C. Bigger rotor blades were installed to counter the blade stall while diving, and that required to have a longer tail boom and then bigger elevators, a redundant hydraulic control system, bigger fuel tanks, and better load capacity. And finally, the UH-1C went in full production line in 1966. Other UH-1Bs in service were upgraded to the new engine as well. Now, on a side note, at this time the UH-1C XM30 was born, which was a modified UH-1C with the ability to carry the XM140 30mm cannons. Obviously it was just a test and really didn't go anywhere. The Model 204 Cobras were a huge success. However, US Army wanted another version that was bigger than the Model 204, hence the Model 205 was born. The helicopter started next to the UH-1B. Even though it had a slow and rough start, it eventually also became a gunship and received the same upgrades as the UH-1C. Obviously, such a successful machine did not went unnoticed by the United States allies. Japan had to eventually replace its aging fleet of H-19Cs, so the Fuji Heavy Industries obtained the license to create UH-1Bs, and was powered by the licensed-produced Kawasaki T53K5. Later down the line, they replaced them with the UH-1Hs and the UH-1Js, which didn't have armaments on board, and then you have the Seahawk. Budak-senpai, skill. Hey, what the fuck? Once the UH-1Ds was released, the Germans got the license to make the Model 205, specifically the Dornier factory. Oh boy, me and Dornier, we've gone full circle again. And this is our German variant of the Huey, called UH-1D, or UH-1D. Get in the chopper. The Italian Augusta company also managed to get a license, not only for production, but also for export as well. Initially they were 204 models, but they were changed to the Model 205s. And then Sweden acquired the Bell 204s via Augusta company and had it in its service until the early 2000s, where they were replaced by the Blackhawks. Yes, Blackhawks again. Even though it was used as a utility helicopter, sooner than later the Swedish Army decided to experiment Bantam ATGMs on this helicopter as well. Initially, the UH-1 Iroquois was supposed to have the role of a troop carrier or a medevac unit. It was during the Vietnam War where the US Army realized that the helicopters without protection are essentially piñatas waiting to be destroyed, so it should have something to defend itself or perform the gunship role. This is where we can finally see some machine guns and rockets being installed on the helicopters. Later on, they started to mount more and better armaments on these helicopters, including air-to-ground missiles. Eventually, the gunship role was also adapted by the new class of helicopters by the name of AH-1 Huey Cobra attack helicopters. The Huey is still in service to this day, with UH-1Y Venom and, of course, whatever this dumpster fire is based off of. This was a short and brief history of the UH-1 Huey. Now let's get on with the armors and modules. Welcome to the Armor and Modular Protection Analysis, where we basically analyze the armors and modules inside of a vehicle. Today's helicopter is the UH-1 Iroquois. Now the first thing that we need to take a look at is the crew. Now there are some minor differences here and there, but generally they all feel the same. You have two basic models. the Model 204 and the Model 205. The Model 204 is a standard cabin with a standard body. The Model 205, on the other hand, has an extended fuselage with a longer profile than the Model 204, which was extended to 104 centimeters. The pilot is situated on the right of the aircraft, while the gunner is situated on the left. Maybe some night vision on every single Huey except for the Swedish variant, and best case scenario, a tow-compatible camera on the UH-1C and the XM30 variant, with 3 to 12 times zoom, and the other Hueys have 6 times zoom, with a basic placeholder cockpit which does not look good at all. I mean, it does give you all the information you need, but let's be honest, it's not really pleasant to look at. It has 2 self-sealing fuel tanks with these fuel presets. The amount of fuel you have on these helicopters are all the same, and you should not have any kind of problems dealing with its fuel consumption. And overall, they're not fuel hungry at all, and their engine is powerful enough. And speaking of its engines, both American and Japanese UH-1Bs and the American UH-1C and the XM30 variant have General Electric T53L11 engines, with the having the L13 variant. And the Swedish HKP3C has Rolls-Royce H1200 gas turbine engine, also the same power as the L11 engines. Honestly, these engines feel pretty much the same, and all of them do have somewhat of a decent performance and a nice climb rate. And even if you're set on fire, I'm sure that the fire extinguisher will be a good friend, since these helicopters do in fact have fire extinguishers. At the end, you have the oil cooling system, transmissions, traction of the control surfaces, and prop shafts. Now let's get on with the air-to-ground weapons, with the first one being the 7-pod FFAR Mighty Mouse rockets, exclusively available on the Italian AB205. And 1 pair and 2 pair of 19 FFAR Mighty Mouse rocket pods, with the 1 pair being available on all Hueys except for the Swedish HKP3C and the Italian AB205, and the 2 pair pods being available on all American Hueys. The FFARs are decent rockets at this BR compared to the rockets that are used on the other helicopters. I'm looking at US 5K. They have a very nice explosive mass and penetration at low BRs. The only problem you might have is that these helicopters don't have CCIP, so it is not going to be easy to aim them at the enemy. But either way, the angle in which the Mighty Mouses are installed are quite standard, and it will be easier to aim them. Again, Cobra! Up next is the TDA 68mm rockets, 22 installed on each pod, only exclusive to the German UH-1D. These things do give me some SNEP Type 23 style flashbacks, but in short, these rockets got half a kilograms of explosive mass, but they have significantly higher penetration than the Mighty Mouse rockets. To me personally, I would prefer the punchiness of the Mighty Mouse rockets, as these guys will have a harder time destroying the target with less quantity of missiles. Sometimes the pulse pen is great, sometimes it's not, and honestly, I still prefer the Mighty Mouse rockets. Now let's have a look at the air-to-ground missiles, with the first one being the RB-53 Bantam missiles, 6 available on the Swedish HKP-3C. Fun fact, these are the first ATGMs I've ever used on a helicopter. Now these ATGMs are not really that great. They have a 2,000 meter range, almost the same explosive mass as a Mighty Mouse rocket, and the maneuverability is serviceable enough. This would not have been a problem if it wasn't for the unfathomably slow speed of the ATGM. This is by far the slowest air-to-ground missile a helicopter has carried, with only 85 meters per second speed. My god. But the good thing about this ATGM is that you get 6 of them stock. It does have a nice penetration, and it does have a nice quantity of missiles. Up next is the AGM-22 air-to-ground missile, installed on the UH-1B, C, and the German UH-1D. The AGM-22s are basically SS-11s and AS-11s. Back then they used to have 4 kilograms of explosive mass, but now they got almost half of what they're supposed to get, since the introduction of its Swedish counterpart. They have a very standard speed and explosive mass, a good firing range and decent penetration with a nice quantity of missiles. The only problem you might have on this ATGM is that it is a little bit slow when it comes to maneuverability. And usually the sight on the Huey helicopters are not that great, so you have to get a little bit closer than usual. And finally we get BGM-71C improved tow missiles, 6 installed on 2 pylons, giving you 3 per pod. Only exclusive to the UH-1C, and UH-1C XM30. Now I have to say, at such a low BR, I have never used TOW missiles with this much satisfaction. I will talk about my experiences with the helicopters a little bit later, but what you need to know about this ATGM is that it has a very nice explosive mass, incredible mobility and maneuverability. Compared to the previous missile, the AGM-22, it is indeed a major upgrade. You still have the same quantity of missiles, but now you have much better control and performance, thanks to the BGM-71C ITO and the camera guidance system installed on your Huey. Take a bit of practice and you can wreak havoc on the battlefield. Now let's get on with the cannons and machine guns on these vehicles. First off, you have the M134 turret and machine gun installed on the outer pylons of the UH-1B, C, CXM30, and the Italian AB205 with 3,000 ammo each. Next up, you have the fixed M134 miniguns installed on the two inner pylons, available on the UH-1B, C, CXM30, and the German UH-1D. And finally, you have the XM140 cannons installed on the left and right of the helicopter with ammo each, only exclusive to the UH-1C XM30. Now these cannons are decent on this helicopter, but honestly it is good for engaging lightly armored targets or roof of the enemy medium tanks. And since you don't have any CCIP, you need to get closer, and I'm pretty sure that the machine guns will give you a warm welcome. And last but not least, the M75 single grenade launcher installed on the nose of the aircraft, only exclusive to the American Hueys. This grenade launcher is very nice. We have already seen it on the H1G, but this one is a little bit different. You only have one of them. The fire rate is much slower, and at the same time you only have 150 of its ammo. It takes quite a bit of time to destroy the enemy, but it is a nice addition to the Huey. No complaints, no regrets. Now let's talk about the mobility. The mobility on the UH-1 Hueys are pretty much all the same. They all feel decently nice, with the only problem you might have is the rotary system that the Bell helicopters normally use. Usually the Bell helicopters tend to have a semi-rigid rotary system. This gives the rotor blades more durability in exchange for worse maneuverability and several major problems that will be quite dangerous if the pilot is not experienced enough. Things such as mass bumping and rotor striking the tail and overall tempering down the mobility of the helicopter when it comes to acrobatic maneuvers are some of the weaknesses that most of the old Bell helicopters have. And when I'm talking about Bell helicopters, I'm not just talking about the Hueys or the Cobras. I'm talking about YAH-63, the competitor to the AH-64. The YAH-63 also had a semi-rigid two-bladed rotary system, but it was not accepted by the Army. But yeah, in general, the Huey's mobility and top speed are quite decent and are good enough as a first-hand helicopter experience. The pitch control is decent, the yaw control is very nice, and the roll rate is slower than the average. Also, I almost forgot about this one, but when you're diving down with your Huey, please be careful with the collective pitch. If you put it to 0 and then pitch down with the helicopter, it will start to lose control insanely bad, and if you're a new player, it's gonna be hard to recover. Now let's get on with the final verdicts. Welcome to the final verdicts. In this section of the video, we're going to talk about which helicopters are worth the grind and spade or not. Let's begin with the American UH-1B. This helicopter is the first to carry the air-to-ground missiles in the American heli tree. Overall, it might feel like a downgrade compared to the previous helicopter, but once you get into the air-to-ground missiles, you will have a much more fun time. It has better engine response, and most importantly, it has ATGMs or rank 2 modifications, which gives you a fresh experience. The UH-1B leads to two other helicopters by the name of AH-6M or the UH-1C. Choosing which one to grind totally depends on you. But to me personally, I would get the AGM-22s, and while grinding either of these helicopters, I can spit it anyways. The UH-1B both in heli PvE and ground RB is serviceable enough, but it is not the best. Your ATGMs do work, but it is going to be painful to shoot the Gepards from 3 kilometers away with the AGM-22s. If you want to, you can skip this helicopter and go for, I don't know, either the AH-6M with K variants of Hellfires or the UH-1C with TOW missiles. Verdict: get it, but spading it is optional. Up next is the UH-1C and the American Tech Tree. Now this helicopter, I have to say, is an absolute beast at this BR. Usually tow-carrying helicopters are at like 9.0 BR and higher, a place where Strela M1s are lurking and waiting for you to spawn in. This helicopter, however, is at a very safe BR, where the most dangerous vehicles you might face up against are either planes, Sergeant Yorks, Vake 40s, and no, I will not mention Santal at all. And let's be honest, Type 93 is there too, but come on, nobody plays that thing. These missiles are incredibly fast and their optics are decent enough for its own BR, so a lot of SPA vehicles will have a hard time shooting you down, while you easily lob tow missiles at them with these. God. I mean, if you know what you're doing. And when it comes to heli PvE, this thing is very amazing when it comes to helping your teammates destroy the enemy SPAs. Verdict, get it and spade the hell out of it. Next up is the German UH-1D. This helicopter is pretty much the same as the UH-1B in the United States, except that you lost your outer pylons and the ability to use your grenade launcher. But don't worry, thankfully you still have your AGM-22 missiles. The UH-1D is a decent helicopter that comes after the Alouette 2, which only has 4 SS-11s. Why do I say SS-11s? I keep saying that it's AGM-22s. And this helicopter leads to the Messerschmitt Bolko-Blom BO-105 PAH-1, which I will eventually make a video on in the future. Verdict, get it, but spading it is optional. Up next, we have the Japanese UH-1B. This helicopter has only one armament preset, and it is 2 pods of Mighty Mouse rockets, giving you 38 total. You start pretty much rough with this thing, and the amount of rockets you have is serviceable, but the amount of RP you have to grind with this helicopter is not going to be forgiving. So I would highly recommend you to use your ground vehicles in order to grind your helicopter, or you know, go for the low-hanging fruit, of course. And there's not a lot of difference between a stuck and upgraded configuration anyways. I don't know, unless you want to maximize your helicopter's performance. Verdict, get it, but spading it is optional. Up next is the Italian AB205A1. Now people would usually take a massive dump on this helicopter and say, oh, it is the worst, it is absolutely terrible, it is very bad. But honestly, I tried it and it's not as bad as people say it is. Sure, you don't have enough rockets, but this is not a vehicle for new players. This helicopter is suitable for those pilots that want to push their targeting practice to its absolute limit. You have 14 Mighty Mouse rockets with 2 miniguns on the side with 3,000 ammo each. It's not that useful in heli PvE, let alone ground RB, so unless you want to be Bruce Leroy or a very accurate player, verdict, don't get it if you don't have to. Or again, the alternate option is always there. And finally, the Swedish HKP-3C. Now this helicopter I made an entire video on around 2 years ago. Back then it was my first helicopter to ever experience anything with. It doesn't have rockets, it doesn't have cannons, it only has 6 ATGMs that are relatively slow and are not that great. The next helicopter, on the other hand, sacrifices the quantity over quality, and gets 2 less bantams in exchange for better explosive mass, penetration, range, and speed. Verdict, I would say get it and spade it if you want to. Having stock missiles is something very special, and this one can be pretty decent starter helicopter. So yeah, sure, why not?
Alright, post-editing Bob Dickinson here. Almost forgot about this guy. Okay, so this one is not on sale right now, but whenever you got the opportunity and you do love the UH-1C, feel free to get it. The only difference it might have between UH-1C, the tech tree version, and the XM30, the premium version, is that the premium version doesn't have SS-11s. Instead, what it does have is the BGM-71C ITOs, the XM30 cannons. It has pretty much everything you need, except for the SS-11s, which were, well, pretty much useless since you had the ITOs. The price is around 8,700, and quite ironic, where some helicopters are in fact cheaper than this damn thing. But yeah, if you like to, feel free to get it. Final verdict, get it and adore it.
The UH-1 helicopters are almost everywhere in our world. Some are made for utility purposes, and some are made to be extremely lethal. Some are designed to kill people, and some are designed to heal people. Hopefully, we will see more variants of this helicopter fairly soon. Ladies and gentlemen, this was pretty much it for today's video. You can like the video and subscribe to the channel, or if you want to support me, you can also give me a super thanks or join my YouTube membership. Ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Bob Dickinson, and thank you for watching.